Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next set of words. Our first word right here is disapprobation. Disapprobation means strong disapproval, dis and appro. So from here, you can understand that it points towards disapproval, right? So disapprobation means strong disapproval, typically on moral grounds. If you think that something is not right and you're disapproving, thinking about the fact that it is not correct or right on moral grounds, then you are, what are you doing? Disapprobation, right? She feared her dad's disapprobation. So maybe the girl was doing something that on moral grounds was not right to be done, and she knew that her father would disapprove, and she feared her dad's disapprobation. He was interrupted in his speech by clamors of disapprobation. That means he was giving a speech, and suddenly clamors of strong disapproval were heard, and he was interrupted. She braved her mother's disapprobation and slipped out to enjoy herself. That means she, even though her mother disapproved of her going out, she braved it, right? She just took the risk and slipped out. That means went outside quietly without anyone knowing to enjoy herself, right? So disapprobation is a strong disapproval, right? Strong disapproval. You can see this monkey man right here disapproving things, right? Okay. Let's look at our next word. Discern. Discern means to see, recognize, or understand something that is not clear. I could just discern a figure in the darkness. That means I could just make out that there is a figure in the darkness. I could just recognize that there is a figure in the darkness. I couldn't clearly understand what it is, right? So if you are trying to understand something that is not clear, what are you doing? You are discern. For example, otherwise you can't see what is there on this paper, right? Can't clearly see. But once you put the magnifying glass, you are able to understand something that was not clear. So you are discern, right? He could discern the note of urgency in their voices. That means he could recognize the note of urgency in their voices. The telescope can discern objects incredibly distant in space. That means the telescope can help you see objects that are really far in space, right? Incredibly distant. So discern means to see or recognize or understand something that is otherwise not clear, right? For example, the telescope, it can discern objects. That means it can see objects that are otherwise not clear. So, discern, right? Discomfort. Discomfort means to make someone feel uneasy or embarrassed. Somewhat resembles the word discomfort, right? So a discomfort is what we feel, right? I feel discomfort. And discomfort means to make someone feel uneasy or embarrassed, right? So these kids bullying this little kid, what are they doing? They are trying to discomfort, right? So the tricky question about his finances discomfited the minister. That means it made the minister feel uneasy. Heavy rain discomfited our plans for a picnic. That means heavy rain made us feel uneasy about our plans for a picnic. We were not very sure. The opposition leader has regularly discomfited him in parliament. That means the leader of the opposition party has regularly made the other person feel uneasy or embarrassed in the parliament. So discomfort means to make someone feel uneasy or embarrassed, right? All right, let's look at our next word, disentangle. Reminds me of my favorite movie, Tangled, right? So disentangle. Entangle means to, cause a messy, let's say connection of things. When things get stuck together, they are entangled, right? For example, this ball of thread, it's all entangled, right? Different colored threads are all entangled. So to free this entangled ball of thread would mean to disentangle it. To free or become free from an entanglement or involvement. It's difficult to disentangle hard fact from myth or truth from lies. That means it's difficult to separate, right? Entangle means to bind together, in a messy way. Disentangle means to get that, entangled mess away from each other, right? So let's say hard facts are to be removed from the mess of myth, right? So it's difficult to disentangle hard fact from myth or truth from lies. I tried to disentangle the wires under my desk. That means I tried to, often happens all our wires, mainly the earplugs. The wired earphones always entangled, right? So when we spend all those hours trying to disentangle it, right? Trying to get it back in that straight form, that means we're trying to disentangle the knots. The balls of wool were all mixed up and I couldn't disentangle them, right? That means I couldn't free them away from each other, right? So disentangle, opposite of entangle, right? To free or become free from entanglement or involvement, right? All right. Next word, disgruntled, right? Hope you can see this team. Unhappy, annoyed, and disappointed about something, talking to the referee like, no, it's not a green card, or it's not a yellow card, it's not a black card. Don't give us that card, right? They have lots of cards, when someone does a foul and they're supposed to get some card, which makes them sit on the side. So they're unhappy about it or annoyed about it. So that is disgruntled. The players were disgruntled with the umpire. So as you can see, these players, they are unhappy with the umpire's decision and they are fighting with him. So they are disgruntled, right? So disgruntled is an adjective that says that someone is unhappy, annoyed, or disappointed about something. I left feeling disgruntled at the way I had been treated, right? That means I left feeling unhappy and annoyed or disappointed at the way I was treated, right? Disgruntled employees are leaving to work for other firms. That means there is some firm which is making their employees unhappy. And these unhappy employees are leaving so that they can work for other firms, right? So disgruntled means unhappy, annoyed, or being disappointed about something, right? Just like these players here. All right. Disintegrate. Disintegrate means to come apart, right? That means break down into components, parts, or fragments, right? Into component parts. That means the smaller pieces that make up a larger thing, when that thing breaks into those component parts, now you can see, what that thing was made up of, or the fragments of that thing. That means the thing has disintegrated. The spacecraft disintegrated as it entered the Earth's atmosphere. When the spacecraft started entering the Earth's atmosphere, it started disintegrating. It started coming apart, right? That means it started breaking down. into fragments. The Ottoman Empire disintegrated into lots of small states. So the Ottoman Empire broke down into smaller states, right? It was now not a collective empire. It was now turned to small states here and there, right? The procedure employs sound waves to disintegrate kidney stones. That means it's a procedure that would use the sound waves to break down the kidney stones, right? So the kidney stones would be broken down into smaller fragments, right? So disintegrate, to make something come apart, or to break down things into fragments, right? Smaller components. So disintegrate. You can see this airplane right here. After the accident, it disintegrated, or that means it broke down, right, into parts. So disintegrate, to come apart or break down into component parts or fragments. Dislocation. Dislocation means something is no longer working in the usual way or place. You can see this joint right here, right? We have heard this often. She dislocated her joint. That means the joint that was supposed to be here earlier, right, is now away from its original position. It has moved further, right? And it is now dislocated. So now this joint would no longer work the way it used to, right? Because it is not in its original place. These policies could cause severe economic and social dislocation. That means these policies could cause the economic and social issues to not be handled the way they were. Millions of refugees have suffered a total dislocation of their lives. That means millions of refugees are no longer able to stay or work the way they were, right? They have been dislocated. They have been moved away. By treatment, all patients with arytenoid dislocation were cured, right? So by treatment, all the patients who were having this kind of dislocation, that means a joint dislocation, they were cured, right? So dislocation, something not being in its usual way or place, leading to absence of its same function, right? So dislocation. Dismantle. Dismantle means to take a machine apart, right? So dismantle is to intentionally take a machine apart or to come apart into separate pieces, right? They decided to dismantle the machine and start again. That means they decided to bring the machine, take it apart into separate pieces, and start making it again. Unions accuse the government of dismantling the health services. That means unions, they blame the government for bringing apart the health services, right? That means breaking apart the health services intentionally, right? The government voted to dismantle its nuclear warheads. That means the government voted that they would now separate their nuclear warheads. So dismantling is intentionally bringing something apart, right? When something comes apart intentionally, when someone does it intentionally, there you say dismantle. But disintegrate is something comes apart all by itself, right? Because of an accident. So dismantle, to take a machine apart or to come apart into separate pieces, but intentional, right? Okay. Next is disparate. So disparate means different in every way. This is not desperate, it's disparate, right? Different in every way or not able to be compared. See this one guy right here? He is different from the others. The 5 experiments gave quite disparate results. That means the 5 experiments gave results that were different in every way, right? The two cultures I have been to were so utterly disparate, right? That means the two cultures were not comparable. They were totally different from each other. As pandemic rises, so do concerns about disparate access to care. That means would different access to care be available for us or not, right? So disparate means different in every way or not able to compare one thing to another. Disparate, right? Dispassionate, right? Now you clearly know passionate, very influenced by this work they want to do, right? Having strong emotion towards the work. And dispassionate is the opposite, not influenced by strong emotion and so able to be rational. Sometimes when people are too passionate about something, their emotions overcome their decisions and they, start acting irrationally without thinking. But people who are dispassionate, they do not allow strong emotions to overcome their or overpower their decisions, right? So they are able to think rationally. A journalist should be a dispassionate reporter of fact. That means a journalist should not be swayed by emotions. They should be able to report news in a rational manner, right? She dealt with life's disasters in a calm, dispassionate way. That means she dealt with the disasters in a way that was more rational than emotional. So dispassionate. He sets out the facts coolly and dispassionate. That means he put forth the facts in a dispassionate way, in a rational manner, without getting emotional. So dispassionate means not in getting influenced by strong emotion and able to be rational because of that. All right. Let's revise. Dispassionate, not influenced by strong emotion, and so able to be rational. For example, a journalist should be dispassionate reporter of fact. That means they should not let strong emotions overpower their rational thinking. They should always be the ones who are dispassionate. That means the ones who think rationally and do not let emotions come in between. Disparate means different in every way, not able to be compared. If two things are not being compared with each other, they cannot be, right? Or they are different, absolutely different in every way. So those two things are disparate, right? For example, the 5 experiments gave quite disparate results. That means gave quite different results. Dismantle, to take a machine apart or to come apart into separate pieces. But this is generally done intentionally, right? For example, they decided to dismantle the machine and start again. That means they decided that they would themselves bring the machine apart and then join it again, right? So dismantle. Dislocation, something moving away from its original position and not being able to work the same way. For example, this joint right here has been dislocated. That means it has been moved from its original position, leading to an absence of the original work it did, right? So something is no longer working in the usual way or place is dislocation, right? For example, millions of refugees have suffered a total dislocation of their lives. Total dislocation of their lives. That means their lives have stopped working the way they used. Disintegrate, to come apart or break down into component parts or fragments. That means something has now broken down into smaller parts because of an accident, perhaps, right? So the spacecraft disintegrated. That means when the spacecraft was going into the Earth's atmosphere, it as soon as it entered, it started disintegrating into smaller parts, right? Disgruntled, Disgruntled means to be unhappy, annoyed, and disappointed about something. For example, these players, they were disgruntled with the umpire. They were not happy with his decision. They were unhappy. They were annoyed with the umpire's decision. So the players are disgruntled, right? Disentangle. It means the opposite of entangle. Entangle means to mess everything up and bind them together. Disentangle means to free these things, right? To free or become free from entanglement or involvement. For example, I tried to disentangle my earphone wires, right? So the earphones that we use, generally they get entangled so bad that we spend a lot of time disentangling them, right? Discomfort. Discomfort means to make someone feel uneasy or embarrassed, right? For example, the opposition leader has regularly discomfited him in parliament. That means the leader of the opposition regularly makes this guy feel uneasy or embarrassed in the parliament. Okay, this guy, there is some guy. Okay, so discomfort to make someone feel uneasy or embarrassed. Discern. Discern means to see or recognize or understand something that is not clear, right? Otherwise, this paper is not clear on the screen, right? But when seen through the glass, magnifying glass, you can see clearly, right? So that means the magnifying glass helped us discern the paper. Similarly, telescope can discern objects at incredible distance, right? So if an object is at a great distance and it's not clear, then seen, without a telescope, seen from the naked eye, you can't really understand what's there in the distant space. But a telescope can make things clear for you. That means it can discern those objects, right? So discern to see, recognize, or understand something that is not clear. Disapprobation. Disapprobation starts with the word disapprove, right? So it actually means disapproval. Strong disapproval, typically on moral grounds, right? If something is believed to be wrong and not morally correct, and someone disapproves because of that reason, someone says no to something because it is not morally right, then they are, what are they opting? They're opting for disapprobation, right? For example, she feared her dad's disapprobation. That means she feared that her dad would strongly disapprove of her actions because her actions were morally incorrect, right? They were not morally right. So disapprobation, strong disapproval, typically on moral grounds. She braved her mother's disapprobation and slipped out to enjoy herself. That means she, even though her mother told her not to go out, she slipped out, means she went out unnoticed, and she did not accept her strong disapproval, right? So disapprobation, strong disapproval, typically on moral grounds, right? And the monkey man says the same, right? All right, guys. Thank you.